In the 1800s, the word lunatic was everywhere. It appeared in newspapers, courtrooms, and official records, and it sounded precise. But it wasn't. A lunatic could be violent, or confused, or wandering, or poor, or simply inconvenient. And once that label was applied, it didn't just describe you. It could decide what happened to you next. Because in places like Ohio, lunatic wasn't just a word. It was a legal category, and there was a process to prove it. It usually started with a complaint. A neighbor, a family member, a local official. Someone would swear under oath that a person was not of sound mind. That affidavit went to the probate court, and once it did, the process began. A warrant could be issued. The accused would be brought in, not for a criminal trial, but for something else, a lunacy inquest. The court would gather witnesses, people who had seen the behavior, people who could describe what had changed, sometimes calmly, sometimes dramatically. Then came the physician, a respectable doctor brought in to examine the person, not over weeks, not over months, but often in a single encounter. The judge listened. The witnesses spoke. The doctor gave an opinion. And then a decision was made. If the court found the person to be insane, that finding didn't end the process. It moved them into the system. Paperwork followed. Certificates were written. Applications were sent. Institutions were contacted. And then came the question, where do you send them? Some were placed in the county infirmary. Others were sent to state asylums. Places like Dayton, Athens, Columbus. These were not small decisions. Distance mattered. Cost mattered. Transport had to be arranged. Clothing was sometimes specified. Everything was documented. And once placed, life changed completely. Inside the infirmary, there were separate wards, including what was often called the insane department. Some people were considered manageable. Others were labeled dangerous. One man, John Schlager, was described as one of the worst cases confined to the insane ward. Violent, unpredictable. At one point, he broke iron bars and injured himself severely trying to force his way through confinement. Others moved between institutions. George Dingfelder had been in the Dayton Asylum, only to later occupy a room in the insane department at the infirmary. Movement like that wasn't unusual, because the system itself wasn't stable. It was constantly adjusting, and sometimes people didn't stay where they were supposed to. Lena Miller walked away from the infirmary one morning. She crossed fields, climbed fences, and disappeared into the woods. For hours she was missing, until she appeared somewhere unexpected at someone's home, calm, comfortable, as if she had simply gone where she belonged. Frank Wisen also escaped. He was gone for days, captured in another county, and returned. When these stories hit the newspapers, they carried a certain tone. Urgent, dramatic, sometimes exaggerated, but not everyone labeled a lunatic was dangerous. In one case, a man described as a wild man was brought before the court. An entire lunacy inquest was held. Witnesses spoke. He was examined, and in the end, he was declared not a lunatic at all, just simple, harmless, and he was released, which raises the question, how many others were judged differently? Because the same system that could release someone could also confine them indefinitely. And once inside, treatment varied. Some were watched. Some were restrained. In one case, a man was reportedly chained to the floor for years, and the paper seemed genuinely puzzled when that failed to cure him. At the same time, newspapers confidently published ideas that today feel absurd. One article suggested that experts could identify lunatics by smell. That mental illness carried a distinct odor. Something detectable, recognizable, almost scientific, but not quite. This was the contradiction of the era. On one hand, there was structure, affidavit, hearings, medical opinions, legal findings. On the other, there was uncertainty, assumption, fear, and sometimes spectacle. And occasionally, the system broke down entirely. In one report, lunatics were blamed for burning down an asylum, an event that suggested something deeper. Not just individual instability, but institutional failure. Because the system claimed control, claimed understanding. It claimed care. But the reality was more complicated. Some people needed help. Some people were misunderstood. Some people were feared. And all of them could be called the same thing. Lunatic, a word that sounded precise, but in practice could mean almost anything. And once it was applied, it could change everything.